Laura, Bravo. Good to see everybody. As you sign in and are welcomed here, we hope that you would just put into the chat what retreat center you're from, or what organization, and your name, and perhaps the Indigenous territory you find yourself on as a way of introducing yourself. I put an example into the text, and we're going to give folks a minute or two of grace as they find their way in and from whatever they were just doing, arriving into this space. Welcome if you're just joining. Alexander, hi. Uh, you can throw your name into the chat. Let us know where you're coming from today. That'd be great. Um, Love to know more about you and where you're at and where you're leading and working. We're just going to get started here, 30 seconds or so. Just a few more folks coming in the door. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. You're just arriving, throw your name and your center and perhaps the Indigenous territory you find yourself on. David's in a coffee shop in Milwaukee. Oh, that sounds lovely, David. I hope you're having a really lovely coffee. Jealous. There's Janet. Hi, Janet. So good to have everybody. Awesome. Well, I'm going to get us started here as people are putting their name and where they're from and the Indigenous territory they find themselves on in the chat. So good to see people coming in from all over Turtle Island and from further abroad than that. We've got Pam in Spain and Usha in Hawaii. So we're spanning 12 time zones at least, we figured, and that's just so cool. My name is Michael, and I'm the network manager for Retreat Center Collaboration, and I'm delighted to host this call today. And I'm really thrilled to welcome Usha Kilpatrick, who is the chair of the board of directors at Mount Madonna Center in California. And today she's going to be sharing the adventure she's had on board staff relations and building strong relationships between the board and the staff leadership team there. And so Usha's going to kind of introduce herself more formally when she gets started, but I'm just so thankful that you've given time today to volunteer and share knowledge with us as a community roundtable. And I'm grateful for all the knowledge that everyone else will offer in. But before we get started, I just would love to ground us in this time together. So just take a break from the keyboard, your pen, or the pencil that's in your hand, and just invite you to just take some breaths with me. Close your eyes and feel your feet on the floor, your body in the chair. Open your hands and just know that the energy of this beautiful earth is all around you. And we breathe in that beauty and goodness. And we find our way to this circle of beautiful humans who care for community in this way day in and day out. And hopefully you'll find some care as well in this time. I just invite you to look around our virtual circle and make some eye contact with all of the folks that are here. So, eyes of gratitude, and just so grateful for each one of you for being here. And we're going to have a great hour together with Usha. So, Usha, without further ado, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Pam, for handling our tech from Spain in the evening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're zooming in from. One of the beauties of being able to gather in this Zoom space is touching folks from around the world. So I'll just start with a brief introduction of myself, and then we'll dive into what I hope is a very participatory conversation and beginning of a longer learning experience together around governance and board staff leadership relationship. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So my name is Usha Kilpatrick. I am calling in.
Usha,
Yep.
just so you know, we're seeing your Gmail email instead of your PowerPoint.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
What are the five
That's,
takeaways
that's
from
not
Trump?
good. You'll see all my unread emails. How's that?
I'm sure we all have the same problem with our email. So
Yeah, okay, here we go. Share. There we go.
perfect. That's better.
Better?
Yeah, thanks.
Oh,
Yep.
um, I am currently serving as the board chair at the Hanuman Fellowship and also serving on the wisdom body, which we call the Panchayat, which plays a leadership role also in our school as the board of trustees of our school. And I'm currently calling in from the Kingdom of Hawaii, where I currently live on the Big Island in South Kona, Kealakekua Bay. I grew up at Mount Madonna Center, lucky enough to have been raised by the beautiful community there and our teacher, Baba Haridas. I have a long history of board experience. I think partly because I first was an attorney in my professional role, and always helpful to have an attorney on a board. So was asked and have also heard the phrase that how do you become a board member? You become a member of one board and then it kind of multiplies on its own. You become a member of many boards. So while I was still an attorney, served on the board of the private school that my children attended here in Hawaii. And then I became the founding director and board member of a public charter school. So have served on government boards as well, the Hawaii Public Charter School Network Board and the Hawaii State Charter Commission. And now am currently serving as the program director for the Healy Foundation, the Hawaii program director for the Healy Foundation. And on two other community organization boards, Kekai Ala Foundation and Ike Lawai'a. So this session, I intend to share some experience from my perspective on boards and some experience gleaned from our leadership team at Mount Madonna regarding the importance of healthy governance and some of what we've learned, and then open it up for a broader conversation to really learn where we can dive in together as a community to continue this learning journey. So first, why this session? Why does governance matter? I'm sure this is probably something we all know, but important to name. A strong relationship between the board and administrative leadership is the foundation, one of the foundations of an effective nonprofit organization. And a healthy partnership between the board and the administration really ripples out into the organization and strengthens the entire organization's culture and contributes to long-term sustainability. So some of the guiding principles of healthy governance, and again, this is just touching the tip of the iceberg and the beginning of a longer journey, but some of the principles are really understanding the difference between the board's role and the role of administration and administration leadership. So as we develop our board agendas and our work for the year, look at, are we governing? And that's the key word. The board governs, which is really around foresight, oversight, and insight. So in kind of a encapsulated paragraph, we steer the organization toward a sustainable future. So again, steering, not implementing. By adopting sound governance practices, making sure we have adequate resources, so that's the finances and other resources, to advance our mission and by ensuring that our work and direction are in alignment with our mission, vision, and values. And that last bit is part of what I think can sometimes become tricky, is when are we ensuring that the implementation is in the right direction, and when are we getting kind of too deep into the implementation? And in this case, also including finding the appropriate governance structure is an important role that will help ensure that that separation of duties is appropriate. And then the board also serves in a support role. So again, just thinking govern and support. We support the administration in the planning and execution of the operations. And then another important guiding principle for healthy governance that we're leaning into is that interpersonal relationship and professional collegial relationship between the board chair and the executive director, and really the whole leadership team, with often the executive director being point person for that leadership team. So investing in regular, honest communication, being really clear about roles and decision-making authority. That's often also another very tricky area. That role clarity, creating trust before crisis hits, and handling tensions early. And in our case, the picture on the left is myself and our executive director and our chief marketing and business officer, communications officer, who Laura and I literally sisters, and Prabha and I grew up as sisters. So we start with a long history of trust and relationship, which has been such a gift, but is really asking us to dive deep into how do we ensure that that trusting relationship continues beyond our personal life experiences that have created that deep level of trust for us. Some of our experience at Mount Madonna, what's working well, what are the governance challenges? What's working well, we are finding that the majority of our focus at Mount Madonna at the board level is on governance. We're moving more toward that. One of our challenges has been that we have a history of a very operational hands-on board. So really needing to find that transition into governance. We have very strong, talented administrative staff leadership, a talented, committed board who have a deep history with the organization. And we have adopted a strategic plan, which is helping to guide our work, which is really helping us to find where is that governance and where is that implementation. Challenges, board recruitment. I'm sure this is a common challenge for everyone. Finding board members who have the bandwidth. That's a challenge for us to contribute in those governance areas. Finding a balance of board members who are connected enough to the operations to understand what's happening on the ground, but also able to be at that 30,000-foot level and operate in the governance space. And then again, how do we continue to ensure the trusting relationships that we have because we grew up together? How do we instill that kind of trust in the DNA of the organization so that when we pass on these roles, it's already a part of who we are and how we are together. And we may have a couple of minutes if anyone else on the Mount Madonna call wants to add. We do have a couple of minutes if anyone else, we have a strong Mount Madonna representation today. If anyone else wants to add anything that they're seeing going well or challenges that we have. All right.
I think you covered it, Ush. I think the movement from a highly administrative board of folks that were carrying the workload while being on the board to a more oversight board with an administrative team on the ground is one of the challenges we're working through together. I think successfully, but it's taking time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would add our board very much shares intention at the highest level, which is tied to our spiritual tradition, though we don't have really any expectations or requirements around that. And that helps create a context then, especially of mutual respect, where we're able to have difficult conversations and then walk out of the room still with togetherness. So I think we're good at allowing our point of view and our convictions to be expressed, but maintain strong relationship.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you, Mo. Very true. Trying to live those practices that we were taught and continue to offer to the world. Living them in the moment of tension is one of the greatest practices.
Mhm.
And I think part of why we wanted to bring these conversations today as a retreat center collaboration is, although we all know how important healthy governance is, it tends to be a very common challenge, not only in retreat centers, but throughout organizations, finding those appropriate role clarities and balances in interpersonal relationships. And, that I've heard stories even where it was going great and then something happens where it falls apart, and it can really undermine an organization in a way that you think might not be possible. To have that tension at that level in the organization really has a ripple effect. And so we wanted to create some space today to begin a conversation, but then perhaps dive into a longer learning journey about how we can do our best. There are always unexpected challenges, but how we can do our best to create strong, healthy organizations with that relationship really at the nexus in many ways. So we'll open up this space now for some um, breakout rooms, everybody's favorite, but the best way to get everyone to have a chance to have some conversation in a short time frame, to really learn from each other about what are we seeing at our centers? What are we seeing in terms of what's going well, and what are we seeing in terms of what are some of the challenges? And if at your center you don't find you have a lot of thoughts to offer in this space, what are you seeing at other centers? What have you experienced in your personal or professional life as challenges around governance? Um, so we'll have about 15 minutes and um, 3 people per group. So just keep that in mind. 5 minutes per person max. And Michael will send some reminders into the Zoom rooms to be sure everyone has space to share. But want to focus on what are some of the 3 to 5 top things going well? What are some of the 3 to 5 primary challenges? And then from those, what are some of the key takeaways about what's working and what's challenging? What are some best practices that we can think about and dive into? So if you can choose a note taker off the bat, that would be great. And someone to share out, because when we come back into this space, we'll share out. And the share out will be really around what are the key takeaways from what's working and what's challenging. And from there, we'll distill that into some potential topics and deeper learning journeys moving forward as a community. So I'll stop sharing my screen and
I hope that that was a fruitful and generative and thought-provoking conversation. I was just saying, Usha, to Pam, how the idea of board responsibility being foresight, oversight, and insight, that's just such a good three very clear words. And I just was,
mm,
she and I were just talking about that as such a helpful tool.
mm,
Anyways, I'll turn it back over to you, Usha.
great. Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to have just like a couple touch points, especially when making agendas and taking your minutes. Are we talking about governance here, or are we diving into something else? Yeah. Great. Yeah. Hope everyone had wonderful, fruitful conversations, some good questions, definitely in our space. So we'll go ahead and share back. We've got a few minutes here for everyone to share some of the highlights of what they heard. And I know that there are note takings happening. So this will be distilled down into a blog digest. So we'll have some takeaways that we can keep with us. So let's start with group one. Do we all know our numbers?
Definitely not.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we're group one, if I
All right.
recall correctly. Michael says I'm remembering correctly.
Thank God for
Um,
that.
I think just go for it.
Yeah.
So you wanted us to just give a quick summary. Sorry, I got distracted by something.
Yeah, no, we're just a quick summary and really focusing on what are some of those key takeaways, the principles of success and common pitfalls that we can build on in some continued learnings.
So we had a really diverse group in terms of where we are, age and stage, and also structure. In terms of whether or not we even have a board. So Ken doesn't have access to a board. It's many layers above him. But here's some things we talked about, that having board members who are directly connected to the work is important, that we need continuity in those relationships. We talked a lot about transitions, both staff and board, and how they can potentially destabilize an organization or really refocus the work. And that's true even when you're having generational transitions, or in our case at Prairie Woods, the transition of founders, and what that leads to looking at the next several decades. So relationship building is key. Having meaningful ways for board members to plug in without doing the work, to be engaged in the work is important. That's my quick summary. What did I forget, folks? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. We touched on that transition of founders as well. So it sounds like it's already a common topic. Who would like to go next?
I know we were number 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember that, Alex?
Yeah. So there were a few kind of commonalities that came up in spite of like very different sort of representations in different kinds of spaces. I think one of the common things that are working well, or strengths, is having boards that are really connected to, understand, and committed to the mission of the organization. And then there were sort of a range of different kinds of challenges on the staff end. How to operate more nimbly and responsively when there's a question about the extent to which the board needs to be involved in decision making around certain kinds of programming. On the board side, when a board is more on the working side, not the governance side, when there's not necessarily a professionalized staff to carry out a lot of the work, and people have different kinds of responsibilities. How to still allow for that work to happen, how to grow and operationalize when board members have that kind of limited capacity, but are in a position where they're contributing very directly to the administrative work of the organization. Generally speaking, especially when we're working for nonprofits, there's this sort of the flip side of having a board that's really committed to the organization, but doesn't necessarily have fundraising capacity or experience, is that sort of limitation, and particularly again when you have smaller staffs and maybe don't have the funding for a specific fundraising position, finding those people that can understand the mission, support the mission, but also support the staff in building relationships, cultivating and fundraising for the organization. Um, Also, like this question came up of a challenge when a board transitions from being more of a working board to a governance board. That's a culture shift, a pretty substantial culture shift. Um, and so, shifting people from that sort of reflexive or habit muscle of diving into something that they're used to doing, when the board is shifting to being more sort of stepped back from the organization. And then also along the same lines, around kind of founder history, legacy, but sort of on a different front when the founders are still involved in an organization, figuring out that relationship where it can still be collaborative, where the board is able to play its role, even when there's strong opinions or positions, from leaders who are also founders. I think those are the notes that I took from our conversation.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for raising the fundraising. That's also a common topic of conversation among boards and maybe a potential topic for a full session. And then, yeah, the like actual authority and positional authority is another interesting conversation that we could dive deeper into at some point. Great. Who's next?
I'm not sure what our number is, but we can go next. My name's Peter, representing the Mount Madonna HR team here, some of us. And some common themes that have been discussed already came up in our group as well. So I'm going to touch on a couple questions that came up that we found interesting. One is, how do you know when it's time for the board to move from the administration to the governance, from becoming less hands-on? So what does that look like from an actionable or attention standpoint? And then what's the process? What are the tools needed to get there? So that was discussed. And then another question was, the pandemic created some burnout from some longer standing board members, and mixed with a fresh batch of board members that have new eyes, fresh energy. What does that look like in healing and moving forward and managing the burnout, which could be a regular conversation, not just from the pandemic, and using that new energy to kind of help revitalize the team? Those are two questions that stood out for us.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That's a common one as well, the burnout. And then, yeah, bridging folks who've been longer and folks who are coming in with fresh new ideas, but also we've always done it this way, but we also learned wisdom from doing it that way. And yeah, how do those threads continue through while inviting new in and carrying the wisdom forward? Great observations. Who's next?
I'll go for our group. I'm pretty sure we were number 4. And one of our members had to leave for another meeting, but we kind of had an interesting conversation, reiterating a bunch of things that people have already said, but the back and forth between having people who have longevity with the organization or experience with the organization, if not necessarily in board or staff roles, but as just experience with the organization is really helpful, because you want people who have that in like innate understanding of how the organization, what its best vision is, but also having new people and having a lot of transition for new board or new staff, and looking at everybody figuring out what their roles are going to look like specifically, especially if the board is also transitioning from governance to from administrative to governance. So yeah, a lot of the same sort of things.
Thanks, Kate. Common thread. Carrying through the wisdom and bringing in the new at the same time. Who hasn't gone?
I can do our group. Usha.
Yeah, great.
I mean, I think kind of just adding to like what's already been said, was one of our members has family relationship inside of the board. So two significant others, and a founder. So kind of who's playing what role, kind of that sense of role clarity, even kind of like with a small board, who decides what, was kind of some of the question. but also recognizing in a startup, you kind of need a founder, you kind of need that energy, need that sense of vision. But then kind of, you know, kind of what happens when other stuff gets in the way there, or perhaps, and different nuances of family relationship inside the board, perhaps. Um, yeah, it's spent a lot of time talking about clarity of like why we're here and the vision and kind of getting, trying to get clear on that and the importance of trust.
Mhm.
Anything you would add to what I shared, team?
I think I would just add that Lon consults with many different organizations. And so he also shared that sometimes what's brought forward as this is a role clarity issue might actually be a trust issue, or a trust issue requiring some clarity to help build trust. So really understanding what the root of some of the challenges might be has been important in his work. Yeah. Who hasn't shared? Is that everyone?
I think that was all. I think that was 5 groups.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We do have a couple of minutes. We're going to do a quick follow-up survey to see what some next steps might be in this area, but want to just open the space for any other reflections or questions or thoughts from what you've heard.
I will just offer maybe a thought in terms of when you have people who are transitioning off the board who are very knowledgeable and experienced, and in terms of training the future generation of board members, I think is very important in terms of the stability of the organization.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you, Janet. Have you seen that, sir? Have you seen that like operationalized in a mentorship or a board orientation, or have you seen that be successful?
Well, I think we've recruited some strong board members, but there are a couple people who are going off the board. I think they will still serve on committees, but they will not officially be on the board. They have to be off the board for at least a year. And so there's an awful lot of strength there. And certainly we've recruited some good board members, but again, there's a lot of, there's a time for orientation. And I think that is very important as new people get into their roles, especially in the executive committee, because they're more involved in more of the day-to-day kind of operations.
Thank you. Christine, I saw you had come off mute, and then we'll go to Lilia and then start moving to Debs.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll just say one thing quickly about onboarding and new boarding. Because we're getting a little more organized, we made the decision to only accept new board members at one time of year rather than rolling. And that has been one practical thing that has helped us to get better at onboarding our new people, is to kind of do it all at once rather than piecemeal. So in response to that question or that thought, Janet. But my question is, we are a really tiny retreat house. We have 16 total beds, and so we're a very small staff, pretty good size board, I think. And so my question is, we're still we used to run our place as like a family, and now I like to think we're running the place like a family business. We're not really looking to be a business, but we don't really. So I'm looking for ways to get real skills that I need that I don't have paid staff for on the board. So we don't have HR, we don't have fundraising, the two big ones. And I'm just, looking for insights. Where do we find these people? How do we recruit them? Especially if they're not the locals that have been there for 40 years with all the building and ground skills.
Yeah, great question. Board recruitment sounds like another topic we could dive deeper into. That's also a challenge for us. Thanks for raising that.
Well, I mean, your question, Christine, really makes me wonder, I think often we think we need to have for instance, HR skills on our board? Or is that someone we could have as a paid consultant that supports the board, right? So it's like, I think of Tatiana, who leads our HR series, like she could be someone alongside a board that you bring in when you need that skill set. And the same could be said with like accounting or legal, because it is hard to find a lawyer or an accountant or an HR specialist, and so that's another way I think of looking at something like that is bringing people in when you need them.
Mm. Yeah.
Hi everyone. It sounds like most of you come from bigger centers, except maybe Christine. But I'm in a situation where I am the executive director and the only employee of the organization with a tiny board of 3 people. And we're not open yet. We're still renovating the property that will be the retreat space. But if you or somebody else you know has been in that situation where they are one employee facing a board, I would love to talk to you and kind of learn more from your experience and maybe, support each other through the process, especially as we grow. I know one thing we're trying to determine is what kind of staffing we will need. And that's because we're still determining what programming we'll have and all these things. But yeah, Christine, I'd love to connect with you.
Great.
I'd just love to jump in there. I said,
Yeah,
I texted, and I hope you'll email me, Lilia, but one of the peer support groups that we're going to start very soon is leaders of new retreat centers. And so I could definitely connect you with at least 3 centers that are currently in process of opening and are going through what you're going through, and they would love to talk with you too. So we'll send me an email and
Amazing.
but that's one of the peer support groups that's going to be coming, by the time fall rolls around. So something to look forward to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for being brave and jumping in, Lilia, jumping in the retreat center world. All right. Well, we're getting close to the hour here. We did want to take a pulse of where we might want to dive deeper into as we move forward with potentially developing some more opportunities for learning and co-learning and maybe expert learning around boards and governance. So we have a quick Menti survey around what that format might look like. And then also Michael was going to drop a couple of questions in the chat to develop some potential content next steps.
Yeah, so there's going to be one question in the chat, and then there's also a poll that just came up. So if you could just take a minute or two to respond to the poll and then also respond to the question in the chat. Pam and I later will pull everything out of the chat, but we're just curious if you could take a minute or two to do that. And then in a minute or two, I'll kind of begin to wrap us up. It's fun watching that poll grow and change on my screen. I love that. And the question in the chat is, where would we like to deepen our conversation and learning together on this topic of governance, board, and staff relationships? So if you have an answer to that question, just type it right into the chat there.
Sorry, Michael, for the question in the chat, is that for this particular topic or in general?
It's for this topic, but if you have an idea for anything else, you can totally throw that in there too. Or if you have an idea of a community call or a roundtable for the future, you can always email me as well. I'm always looking for ideas, but yeah, specifically around the board governance piece. And while that's happening, I'll just say that we do have a call coming up in June that Lon, who's actually on the call today, will be leading and it's around a humble board approach, and it's around 6 key behaviors that strengthen new boards and leaders. So that's on June the 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're really excited to have a 90-minute session with Lon on his experience in supporting boards. And that's kind of how we're working things right now. We have these community calls, which kind of spark some ideas, and we're really sitting around the table, kind of batting it around. We move it into another area of sort of key learning together, and it could evolve into something like our Tea with Tatiana session or something at our annual retreat, etc. So it's always good to see how things are evolving and changing. So we have 2 minutes left here. I just want to start off by saying a huge thanks to you, Usha, for taking time to prepare this presentation and to, really think about it. I know that you've been instrumental on helping guide the board of directors with Mount Madonna from really a management board into a governance board, and that's a hard transition to make. I know from my own experience with the RCC Stewardship Circle, which is kind of like the board that sometimes you're management and then you go to governance and then you're forced back into management. And this is the ebb and flow of being on a board of directors and going sometimes with the flow, but also trying to create a container, for the goodness to happen. And I just also want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time to join the call today. We're just so grateful to see beautiful faces leading these beautiful centers of healing and restoration, which are so needed in our world right now. These are places, harbors of goodness in a sometimes sea of wavy seas. So keep doing the good work and fighting the good fight. If you haven't signed up as a member of RCC, I would really love to chat with you about what membership looks like. We do have someone supporting memberships right now. So if you can't swing a membership, we do have someone who would offer a grant towards making that possible. So reach out. I'd love to talk with you. You can book a meeting right on my calendar. And our next call is going to be Tuesday, April 14th at 1 p.m. It's the last of our 6-part Tea with Tatiana HR sessions, which will be communication skills for difficult conversations. A really, really, really good topic to have around when working with staff members, but also when working with board members. Sometimes you have to have a difficult conversation as board members with one another. So we hope you're having a hard time getting into the RCC website. Okay, I'm going to look into that, Kate. Is it the website or registering for this event?
The website. I've tried to access it and it keeps timing out, just FYI.
Okay. We're going to thank you for pointing that out. We'll check into that. There's always a fun technical glitch with something. I'm sure you've all
Frustrating for me
experienced that.
too, Kate. Yeah, the
Okay.
website is just, trying to load and nothing is loading. So, but
Well, that's how I feel in my brain right now. So
maybe it's overloaded because we all want to access it right
yeah,
now.
that's right. Well,
Those are the problem
my email is michael@retreatcentercollaboration.org. And I put it in the chat earlier under Lilia's question. So you can grab that right from the chat if you wanted to email me about something. So yeah, just ending this time with gratitude for all of you, for opportunities coming in the future for membership in our next call. We look forward to Lon leading a governance call in the future, and can't wait to see you all soon. Hope you have a good long weekend if you're having a long weekend, if it's a long weekend where you are, and hope you have a great day.